having some faith and confidence in yourself, know what you're actually trying to accomplish, and then find something that matches you. Don't just go try to match someone else.
So you can approach your job search by stepping away from that imposter syndrome and specifically asking to speak to the folks who have the information you need.
I mean, think about it. If 1,000 people throw a piece of paper in front of you, but one person comes up and talks to you, who are you going to want to know more about?
And who are you going to remember? Welcome back, everyone, to the Unfulfilled Achiever podcast, where we talk about achieving levels of success, but still feeling like something is missing. Hey, y'all, it's Melanie Desir with my co-host, Justin Wendell. How you doing, buddy?
Good, Melanie. How are you?
I'm good. You notice anything different today?
Yeah, little change today. Brought something a little different.
Little
different
change.
flair.
I always tell my clients you got to take your lemons and make lemonade. So this morning the hair was just not cooperating. So here we are. Y'all are getting introduced to my alter ego. Her name is Reese. So she may show up from time to time.
We'll see how she handles the podcast.
Exactly.
Let's go, Reese.
We'll see we'll see how she is at hosting the podcast. But yeah, so back today. Hope you guys enjoyed our last episode. We were thinking about going into 2024, some changes that are going on. And one thing that I've noticed with some of my clients, and then just, we come from the banking industry, that there were lots of layoffs. Like toward the end of the year, there are a lot of folks out there looking for new opportunities. And so we started thinking about, what that interviewing process is. And we're all about doing the work and being authentic. And so we thought, let's talk about the interviewing process and bringing your authentic self to that process. So how do you approach interviewing?
Well, the holistic process, the job search, the interviews, all those different pieces, it's changed for me dramatically. And this is what we were talking about kind of offline is prior, it was a lot of anxiety. Like, who's going to be interested in me? How do I fit in? I put a bunch of applications out. Let's see what sticks. Looking at job descriptions and title, like, do I really fit that mold? And post internal work, it's been very different. I'm much more picky. I'm much more, does this role suit me? Is the company the right fit? Is the potential hiring manager the right fit? So I'm looking at it very, very differently. It's more of, can I fit their mold? Moved to, can they fit what I'm looking for? Is it a good match holistically? And I think that's changed my perception and my approach significantly. It's less about the desperation of got to find a job, more about let's find the right fit. Let's make sure it's something that's going to work well.
Yeah. It's challenging when, like, let's say you're in a situation where you've been laid off, and that's a huge shock. And there can be some of that desperation coming into play and just getting to the point where it's like, I'll take anything. Well, before you get to that point, take a step back. You talked about, once you did the work, you approached the process a bit differently. I recall in some instances, we talked a couple episodes back about imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So going through the process of seeing a role that you're interested in and thinking, oh, I don't know, would they like me? Is my background good enough? Or expecting and looking for something that's like a 100% fit with your background before you even think about applying. And if it's a 100% fit for you, then you probably should be shooting for something that's a bit more challenging and like stretching yourself for that role.
Yeah, I think it's important to realize it's about growth. And I think what people don't have a lot of inside information to is how that actually works, like how those job descriptions get written, how all those things come to pass. And it's a lot of times the hiring managers are shooting for the stars. They're putting things on there they know they don't really need, but man, it'd be great if they had this. Because a lot of the cases, and you've written these too, you know what this process is like. It's what is the ideal candidate if they had absolutely everything you wanted. The reality is, to your point, if you get somebody that has absolutely everything, if they are the type that wants to grow, they're not going to be happy in that role for very long. They're going to get bored. They're going to want something new, and it's not going to be a great fit. So typically hiring managers may put everything on there, but they're looking for 70, 80%. And the really good ones are looking for more the right fit as a person and an employee, and most of the skills, a good chunk of the skills, because they're going to teach you the rest. So don't be intimidated by the title, the job description, those types of things, because that's usually just kind of the baseline, and they're just trying to get a feel for the response to that and how are people looking at it. I'm actually surprisingly going through some of this now. I decided it's a great time to kind of re-enter. I've actually been looking around for a while, just keeping my options open, but it's been a what's going to benefit me, what's going to allow me to keep doing what I'm doing, keep walking my purpose, keep doing the things that matter to me to get my fulfillment, and also fit what is fulfilling to me from a job perspective. So I've actually spent quite a bit of time just looking and saying, what am I good at? Where can I potentially grow? Where can I go make a difference to get some fulfillment there? But also not be so inundated that I can't do the things outside that matter to me. So I think it's extremely important as you're looking for jobs, or even if you're in a job and you're saying, look, I feel like it's time for the next layer, having some faith and confidence in yourself, know what you're actually trying to accomplish, and then find something that matches you. Don't just go try to match someone else.
Yeah, have a plan,
Have a plan.
really. So, doing that work, knowing your purpose. Sometimes your next role is not going to be in your purpose. It may not be your passion. Sometimes you have to take something and it's more for that moment, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But when you approach looking for your next role, one thing you mentioned is we've both written job descriptions before, and the main contact person is probably going to be the recruiter. That recruiter may or may not have really good insight into that role and what that role requires. A lot of times, job descriptions are dropped in the recruiter's lap and they don't know more than what is on that piece of paper. So, one thing I would highly suggest, and I know you mentioned this in your journey that you're on, reach out to the recruiter once you post, contact the recruiter directly. Like if you're in LinkedIn and it has that person's name, send them a DM and introduce yourself and ask them, can you have some time? Speak with them about the role, pick their brain, understand what they're looking for, what the company culture is, as much as you can get out of the recruiter. But I would highly suggest taking that next step and asking to speak with the hiring manager. A
Yeah.
good hiring manager would be very much open to speaking with you. They'll look at your background, they'll look at the information that you included on your resume, they'll look at your LinkedIn page, and then if they feel you're a good fit, they would absolutely want to speak with you. If a hiring manager is not open to speaking to you, to me, that's a red flag. Like, we'll point out different red flags along the way, but a good manager is going to be intrigued by someone who takes initiative to ask to speak to them. So you can approach your job search by stepping away from that imposter syndrome and specifically asking to speak to the folks who have the information you need.
Yeah, I think that's a good point you're touching on there. If you think like, hey, I'm not comfortable with that. Like, why would they want to talk to me? Why would they want to reach out? Is it the imposter syndrome? Is it the, what inside of you is telling you that they wouldn't want to talk? My last 3 or 4 jobs, I went and talked to that head of the division directly before I applied. Now, I agree with putting the application in, but keep in mind, not only do recruiters not necessarily know all the information about the job all the time, especially if you're in a highly specialized field, like I'm in data, there's only so many people and very few recruiters that truly understand what goes on in that. They also are getting inundated with resumes. So if you just blind apply, you're just another name on the stack.
Mm-hmm.
And when they go through, they're just scanning resumes. They have to go through thousands sometimes. So they're just scanning for buzzwords. That doesn't portray you the way it needs to be portrayed. So one of the ways you can stand out, absolutely correct, Melanie, is reach out and be, there's a difference between assertive and cocky and pushy. So there's nothing wrong with being confident and a little bit assertive of saying, hey, I'm going to reach out. I'm going to touch base with them. And I agree with you. We talked about this yesterday. part of it initially, I was like, well, I'm not going to apply right away, or on entry level jobs, I wouldn't necessarily reach out. But I agree that you still stand out that way. So I think there's still value in it. I mean, think about it. If 1,000 people throw a piece of paper in front of you, but one person comes up and talks to you, who are you going to want to know more about?
And who are you going to remember
Right.
also?
Yeah.
And to your point about recruiters being inundated with resumes and there's just scanning, a lot of times the recruiters aren't, and most times now in this day and age, it goes through a system and the system is looking for different buzzwords. And if you don't have certain information within your resume, it doesn't even make it to the
Right.
recruiter. So if you post for the role, following up with the recruiter is an opportunity for the recruiter to look and say, well, wait, I don't even have this person. I'm talking to this person and they seem like they're a fit. I don't have them in my system or it didn't come to me. Let me make sure I have it. So following up with the recruiter is a way to make sure that your resume actually made it through that first check done by the system.
Yeah. It becomes a formality to look at their resume or to have the application in or whatever it is. If you had a conversation, they say, hey, we like you, we want to talk to you. It's still something that has to happen. But I agree. I like those systems they're decent. A lot of it's what's called OCR, which we won't get in all the technical pieces of it, but it's looking at the paper and trying to translate the paper into filling in their own boxes. And 9 times out of 10 doesn't work. I had my resume done professionally quite a while ago, and it's very nice. It's all set up very professional, but it only picks up like half. When I go into one of those pre-fills and I load my resume, it picks up like half the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you're right. They are scanning through there. That's how they do it with more speed and more volume, and you could be missed from that. So I think it's extremely important to take that initiative, reach out, and LinkedIn's a great resource. You go in, sometimes they'll put the hiring manager. If not, one of the things that I'll do is I'll go to people, I'll go to the company, I'll go to people, and I'll search recruiter, or if it's higher level executive recruiter or whatever it is, and I'll look for people that seem to fit in that mold, and I'll reach out and say, hey, not sure if this is a particular role you're handling, but I was looking at this position. I would love to talk more about what that looks like and what you're looking for, and if it's something that may be a good fit. And there have been times where I've done that and they said, hey, I don't have that role, but let me get you in touch with the right recruiter, or let me get you in touch with the hiring manager. You still set yourself apart and you've gotten your first in. I've also had one where that particular recruiter didn't respond at all. Recruiters have different levels of quality too. So I went and looked at another one and I said, okay, here's another recruiter. Now I didn't do this like the next day. I gave them a couple days to look and respond. But a few days later, I look and say, "Hey, here's another one. Hey, I had reached out to this person. I think that they're busy. Maybe haven't had a chance to see the message yet, but I would really love to understand more about this particular role. Are you the recruiter that's in charge of that one?" Eventually, you're going to get to somebody that matters. But to your point earlier, if you just keep hitting brick walls, that can give you a little bit of insight into the company too. If
Yes,
if
that
they're
can
recruiting,
totally be a red flag. If you're not getting the feedback, if you're not getting the responses, it may be that the recruiter is just slammed.
yeah,
Why do they have so many open roles? That may say something about the culture of the company. So at the end of the day, it's not just about you being interviewed by the company, you're interviewing them as well. Does it fit what you're looking for? Is it going to get you to the next level? What is your plan? We've talked about having goals that extend, some time out. Is this opportunity going to get you to the next level? Whatever your plan is, your plan may just be, this is an amazing company. I want to get my foot in the door. And you may be open to taking something a little less than, what you're qualified for, but make sure that it's a good fit for you as well. Ask those good questions, and we can go a little bit deeper into that. But I wanted to follow up on one thing that you mentioned when you're talking or when you're reaching out to the recruiters and trying to figure out and get to the right person. Another way you can do that is to use your network. So if you know that this particular role is with XYZ company, do you know people who work there? Reach out to the folks that you know in your network who work there or who may be connected to people who work there. That's also a good way to kind of get your foot in the door, get directly to the hiring manager or directly to the recruiter. So folks in your network can really help you in that regard as well. But one thing that just rubs me the wrong way, and I'll bring this up, and I just, please do not do this. I have had people look up people who work at the company. We don't actually know each other, we're not connected, or maybe we're connected, but we've never spoken ever. And they reach out directly to me and sent me a job description and, hey, can you help me? I don't know you. I'm not going to put my name on the line or connect myself with someone I don't know. Do not cold reach out to someone about a role. Make sure you're reaching out to people who are actually in your network and you're connected with, because that could backfire. I would never do this, but somebody may be frustrated or irritated that you reached out, and they may reach out and say something negative about you. So be careful in that respect as well.
Yeah, it's important to remember that everybody responds to things differently. So if you don't know them and you don't know how they're going to respond, you're absolutely right. It could have a negative connotation. Um, I I did exactly what you just suggested when I started looking at this particular role that I'm working through now. I found out I have four people that I've worked with before that I knew that worked there. So I was able to reach out and talk to them and say, hey, what do you feel about the company? And I knew they'd give me honest feedback. Again, I was asking about the company, not can you help me get this role? Even though I knew these people, it was, what can you tell me about the company? Do you know the hiring manager? I was doing more interviewing. I was trying to understand, because if I didn't like what I heard from the people I knew, then why would I reach out? But again, I have a pretty decent sized network now on LinkedIn. I think, it's at the where it just says 500 plus, I think. And there are people that I've seen at companies I'm interested in, but I'm never going to reach out and say, hey, I know we really haven't talked, but will you go and put a good word in for me?
Right.
That doesn't
Don't
really
do
make
that.
sense. So I 100% agree. I think you got to be careful there. And I honestly just recommend, don't even have that thought in your brain. If you go with the thought of, hey, I want to understand the company and I want to understand the role better, again, you switch the dynamic to your interviewing to see if it's a good fit for you, which changes the overall direction of the conversations. So I think that that's just a good way to approach that. And then if you know somebody really well, like this one place, one of my old employees is there. Three different people that I've worked with closely are there. So I'm like, okay, well, I know I already have a small network built into that company, so that's a plus. I also know that they have some good things going on. So I was like, let me chase it down. Let me take a look. But if you go in with a different approach of do something for me, you were 100% right, Melanie. It starts you off on the wrong foot. So be cognizant of that.
Yeah. And to your point about the interviewing, like you're also interviewing to me, and I've interviewed, I can't even countless people. When someone approaches the interview from the perspective of, I'm seeing, is this a good fit for me, as well as you're seeing if it's a good fit for you, that shows confidence to me.
Yeah.
So when you ask me questions about the culture, you ask me questions, why is this role open? You're doing your due diligence. That makes me more interested in you. You're not just jumping in and just wanting to take this because it's available. You know your worth and you know what you bring to the table. And so you're interviewing me as well and trying to see, asking me questions about my leadership style. How am I as a manager? I've also had people, and I've done this as well, asked to speak to people on the team, to interview folks who may be their peers or others on the team, to get the perspective of someone who's in that particular role and who can give feedback on, what leadership is like or what the environment is like. Now, there's a caveat to that. If you're a lower level employee, that may not be the approach you want to take. If you're confident and comfortable, I say by all means ask if you can speak with somebody else on the team. I've actually done that before, and this was a role that ended up being very, very, very challenging. I'm glad that I did it because I learned a lot in that role. But in speaking with somebody on the team, he was very honest and transparent and told me that the manager was a micromanager, told me that that person would hover when something was due, literally hover around the desk. And I heard him, but I don't think I really heard him. And when I actually got into the role, that's exactly what happened. And I went to him and I was like, you were the most transparent. Like, you were so honest with me. I appreciate that. I didn't identify or really lean into that red flag. Like, be very cognizant of the red flags you're seeing. Write them down. Make sure, because you talk to a lot of people, make sure that you're writing this stuff down when you go to make your decision on whether or not this is a good fit. Make sure you have that in the equation as well.
Yeah, and remember that everybody is different. So that red flag, maybe I'm sure there are some people that are okay with micromanagers. I'm not. I think it's a terrible way to approach it. But some people are just like, whatever. I check the boxes. It doesn't bother me. So they may hear that feedback and say, you know what? If that's the worst of it, I'm okay. I would guess most people would hear that and say, that's not really what I want. So be willing to walk away if it's not a good fit. I think we get kind of sucked in and say, oh, this has got to be the job. We've got to take this job. And we overlook all the red flags. I know I'm guilty of that. I've done that. So it's one of those things that be willing to walk away if that's the right case. One thing I think might be good is to talk a little bit about how do we steer interviews to work in our benefit if we're being interviewed. I know you talked about some of the questions you asked. I got some things on my mind, but anything else you want to kind of add to how, when you're being interviewed, how you redirect and steer that conversation?
Well, I'm super curious as to what you have in mind. So jump in.
Yeah, I think for me, I pay very close attention to the person that's doing the interviewing and how they approach it. Are they very rigid? Are they, here's my 5 questions I'm going to ask and I want very specific answers? Are they more laid back? Are they kind of already coming off with this kind of a little bit negative tone, like maybe they're having a bad day or what's going on? So the first thing I do is try to assess the person. In almost every case, I try to relax them. If I can get the person in a conversational mode versus the rigid ask question, get answer, ask question, get answer, the interview flows much better because they start to see the authentic you versus how did you prepare to respond to this question. Because almost everybody, I mean, we've worked at enough companies where they say, you have to do this. You have to ask these questions. You have to fill out this document about how the interview went. And that's, to me, that's not conducive to a strong interview, but that's just what a lot of companies are to drive consistency. So I know that's going to happen, but I work to get past those. Like, I can give you that answer, but even as we're going in there, I will turn and ask them a question. Like, I just met with one of the tops of a company and she would ask a question. I'd give that and I'd say, hey, so how is that working for you? Like, how is this affecting you and your vision and where you're taking it? So I turn around and ask that question midstream and they would immediately say, oh, okay, well, then start to go into what's working and what's not. And I would get more information out of them. The quicker I get them to conversation where we're just, I mean, it's funny because one of the ones I would notice, like one company I noticed they had like bourbon in the background.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, so, I see a great bourbon collection. How long you been collecting? What's going on? And I would get into the conversation. I think people forget that people doing interviews, the people that are executives, we talked about this before, they're just people. And they still want to be people versus just kind of the rigid black and white sometimes. So getting them more comfortable talking to you, they start to think about, I can see myself working with this person. And I think the higher you get, the more important that is, because at a certain level, it's less about how you execute the day to day and more, can I deal with you on a day to day? And so setting that precedent of, how to engage. And for an introvert, this was the hardest thing for me to get used to. It took a while because I'm just like, okay, I'll answer your questions. What do you got? And then getting to the conversationalist has completely changed the dynamic of how I am getting interviewed.
I think what you just talked about, a lot of people would view it as an executive level skill to be comfortable enough to walk into the interview and kind of take in your surroundings and bring up something and make it a more conversational tone. I think that takes a lot of skill. I think that's a great point. Anybody can do that. You don't have to be an executive to do that. That would be very impressive to me if someone came in a lower level, interviewing for a lower level position, and they made it a more conversational tone. I agree with you 100%. That would give me an idea of this person's personality and what it would be like to work with them. So I think that's a really, really good point. If you can come into the interview when you're preparing your questions, because obviously you should always have questions that you want to sprinkle in, be able to respond, think about what's being said. Don't be just so rigid that I have questions 1 through 5 and I have to ask them like a robot, or wait to the very end when they ask me, do I have a question? You can respond to what the person is saying and ask your own question. Like you said, you flipped it and asked them a question about what y'all were just talking about. But I think that is a higher level skill that might take a little more time to nurture. But if you start now, you can be ahead of the curve, and that's what this is all about: us sharing, the things we've learned along the way.
And I think that's the part, right? I have seen people that at earlier level positions that can have the conversation. You, but an intelligent leader is also going to pay attention to if they're just BSing. So make sure you're not BSing. Make sure it's legitimate. And you hit it right. It's about not derailing the interview. That's not the goal. It is about, can I show that I paid attention to what was asked, and then incorporate my questions? That makes it more the conversation. So I agree with you. It is something I've had to gain over time, but start early, practice
Mm-hmm.
that, try it. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll be with it. And that'll allow you to set yourself up. Because remember, you're also setting a first impression for this hiring manager, this company, all these different things. So you're starting to set what they can see and expect out of you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're being authentic about it and you're asking those questions, they're showing you're paying attention, they're showing you're actually curious, and you're doing some of the interviewing too. It's a give and take. They'll start to see, okay, this person has potential. This person can potentially be somebody that moves up the chain as well.
Right. Another red flag that comes to mind in the interviewing process is, we've been talking about culture
Mhm.
and manager style and things of that nature. Another thing that to look for is, how long is the process taking overall? That's huge. It can tell you so many different things. It can be an indicator of so many different things. You may not know why it's happening, but nightmare example for me was an interview process that took 5+ months. And sometimes the higher you go up the food chain, the more in depth the interviews will be. You may have to talk to more people, and I get that and I understand that. But I think I spoke with 8 people in this process over those 5 months. It does not take 5 months to determine whether someone is a good fit. It does not take that long or talking to that many people to determine if somebody's a good fit. That could be an indicator that, why is it taking so long? Are they not able to make decisions? Are they not nimble in making decisions? That can tell you there's a lot of red tape happening behind the scenes when an important decision has to be made. It could tell you that about the pipeline. Why do they have so many open roles if it's taken so long to just get this one role pinned down? The recruiting process, it could be so many different things. But if you have an interview process that's taking more than a month or so, a month, things happen. There could be things going on, and a month to me is not that bad. But if it's taken 3 4, that to me is something that you should really kind of think about before you walk into that situation.
I think I know which company that is.
Maybe.
I may or may not have had a similar experience. Um, so I agree. To me, the higher you go up, I think it takes a little bit longer, but not crazy amounts. To me, a well organized company will go through a series. They'll gather resumes for the first week or two. They'll typically do a phone screen of 10, 5 to 10, depending on how many apply and depending on the role. And then they'll want to actually talk to 3, and they'll actually interview 3. And that timeline, 2 weeks to a month, depending on the role, I think is probably max. If they have quite a few candidates, that is it. There are busy calendars, there are things going on. I will tell you, the right company, I pay very close attention to, when do they tell me they even have availability? Oh, well, this person can't get to you for 3 weeks. Okay, do I want to go to a company that I can't even make 30 minutes open and for 3 weeks? I don't know that I want to work there. And then there are other companies that say, hey, this person, okay, especially as you get higher up, you're talking with the C-suite people. They're like, hey, this person's pretty busy, but we have time over the next week. We can free up a couple pieces. That I literally just had this. They said, hey, I can make time tomorrow, or I can make time next week. Just have apologies. I have a lot going on. That at least tells me that, hey, they have pockets they can free up, and they're willing to make that work. They want it. They're interested. That tells me a lot. So I 100% agree with you. I've been through those 5 month, 6 month interview processes. And I actually had one, and I actually really liked this company. I was very interested in it. I had to go through a personality and a leadership testing program, like where they put me through, and it was a whole third party, and they were going through scenarios of all these different things. And you went for that, and I came down to me the last person, and I ended up not getting the job. The other person got it, but I'm like, man, that was thorough. But I still think the company was great. But maybe it was because the role was so high. I mean, it was like second in command or third in command of the company. But it's just like, man, that's crazy that how many of these go through. And I've been in a couple companies that do that. So pay attention. Like you're saying, those are all not necessarily red flags, but they're all signs and they're all tells to the company and how they move forward. You have to determine if it's a red flag to you or if it's something you're good with. Don't make it something you're good with because you think this has to be the role. If it's a red flag, it's a red flag. And I think
Yeah.
that's important. Be honest to yourself, be authentic to yourself about what really matters. And that'll help you land the job that is actually going to better fit with your life. It may not be your purpose. Like, there's no company job that's going to be my purpose. It's the reality of it. So I have to find a job that fits with it, gives me some fulfillment for what I'm doing, but also allows me to follow my purpose. That was a huge thing in my search.
At the end of the day, I think it's all about trusting your gut.
Yep.
And then using the tools that you have to evaluate as best you can. If you're seeing red flags, use your network, talk to people who work in the company, people that you trust, share your, thoughts with them. If you're, comfortable enough with them, you can share your concerns. If it's someone that you're not as close to, you can ask questions to get at the information that you need to get at.
Yep.
Make sure you're leading with your authentic self and taking the time to realize, is this really something that I want? Is this really a good fit for me? Or sometimes it's a means to an end, and that's okay. You have to be comfortable with the decision that you're making, but leave that imposter syndrome at the door. That's so important. It shows so much more confidence when you walk in knowing your worth and what you bring to the table. That's going to shine through in the interview as well. We didn't talk as much about preparation, but obviously being prepared is super important. Knowing as much as you can about the company, doing your research about the company, and having some good questions. Just throwing a question out and showing that you've done your research can put an interview on a totally different track. If one of the first questions you ask is related to a transaction that happened recently or something that's going on in the industry, how are you guys thinking about this? Doing that research and showing that you are prepared shows me that, oh, this is the type of person you'll be in this role. So,
Yeah.
all things to consider as you guys think about interviewing, thinking about different roles that you might want to take. We are very sensitive to the fact that there, a lot of folks out there that are looking. So we just want to share as much wisdom as we can to help y'all go through this process.
Yeah, and I think if there are points that we made today or points that are kind of similar that you all want more information on, let us know in the comments. We can dig a little deeper. You have two Fortune 100 executives in front of you, well, former 100 executives that we have a lot of experience. And that's a big part of this podcast is sharing our experiences and trying to help others. There's the aspect of kind of leaving corporate America and coming back. What is that like? What's that impact there? There's different things that we can talk about, and we want to make sure that we're providing value to you all. So leave us a comment. We love to dig deeper. We're trying to keep them down to half an hour, a little more digestible now. So we can never get everything we want out there. We would probably talk for hours. But let us know what you're interested in, and we can maybe make an episode just around those particular pieces.
Absolutely. we hope you guys found this interesting. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and like so you can know what's going on and get information when we drop a new episode. And we will be talking to you guys soon. Y'all be good.
Thanks, everyone.